Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. I've got a great podcast lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about how digital transformation strategies and SaaS are reshaping and improving field industries such as manufacturing, energy, healthcare, all areas that you don't associate with technology. So hopefully we're going to learn a few things together about AI and its influence on field service and product design. And I'm also going to introduce you to asset data gravity and a few other things along the way too. So buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to the US, where Amit Jain, Chief Product Officer from a company called ServiceMax, is waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about how you got here and share your origin story with everyone?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So, for me, I'm I think first generation, I think that's the right word, a U.S. citizen, where my family immigrated from India, back in the late 1970s, and my dad actually was a aerospace engineer for Boeing, and that's how, coming from his studies in India, got recruited into the United States, and then been long time Californian, all but 2 years of my life, and essentially, in terms of how I got here, through lots of left turns and right turns in my life, I ended up going to college and really deep diving into economics and data analysis and statistics, and then my started a career doing econometric analysis, which is a fancy word for doing regression analysis with a lot of big data sets for people. They were like, "Hey, Amit, we need to tell a story based on this data." So that's what I was doing, fresh out of college, and then that actually lent itself really well into this is now in the let's say mid 2000s in the Bay Area, where a lot of these tech companies were saying, "Well, hey, we're looking for people with that profile where we have this data warehouse, right, of a lot of information." And I ended up falling into e-commerce sites for in travel under Expedia with a company called Hotwire.com, and that was my first foray, Neil, into technology. When they're like, "Hey, here's a boatload of data we're collecting from people scavenging the site. Can you help us prioritize how to add features onto the site? For how to meet revenue goals." And from there, I started going into software and kind of catapulted me in this direction into working for SaaS companies.
And I'm so glad I asked you that. And I think it's so important to share those stories and those left turns and right turns along the way. But if we fast forward to 2022, in present day, you're now with ServiceMax. So can you tell the listeners a little bit more about the kind of problems that you're solving for businesses with your technology, and also what makes you a little bit different from other solutions out there?
Absolutely. So, just to level set, so we at ServiceMax, we're the leader in asset-centric field service management, and so field service management is this software category serving approximately 40 million technicians globally who install, maintain, and repair machines across different industries. So, the type of industries we focus on, Neil, are manufacturers and medical device manufacturing, industrial manufacturing. Really the type of companies that produce high value assets that it's actually quite complex to take care of these assets throughout their life cycle. You can think about an MRI machine, for example, in a hospital, where they're very expensive machines. There's a lot of incentive from the hospital's perspective and the manufacturers to extend the life of that machine to maximize the usage. And so, we have this mantra here at ServiceMax where we say we help our customers keep the world running, because the types of equipment that our customers build, quite frankly, keep the world running. And, for us, to your point about what differentiates us in the market over the last decade or so is really field service management. A lot of people think about it as someone in a van coming to to actually just do some quick service and move along on their way, and basically create a work order, close the work order, send Neil a bill, and move on. And the way we look at it's actually a little bit different. We don't look at it from the point of view of just a technician closing a work order, but really that life cycle of the piece of equipment or that asset when it was first created. So when it was installed, there's a lot of things that need to happen where there's service warranties associated with it. After the warranty period's over, what's the failure likelihood? Is there an opportunity to do post-warranty service? When parts are removed, what's the life cycle of taking refurbished parts and having it come back into the device? So this is what we mean when we say ServiceMax, we're more asset-centric. We focus more on the life cycle of the asset in terms of how our mobile and web apps help manufacturers extend that life. And there's a lot of business reasons why that's important, from the manufacturer's perspective, but that's what makes our software very, I think, attractive for these more complex type manufacturers.
And that's one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today, because one of the things I always try and do is get people thinking differently about technology and how it surrounds them in industries that they don't associate with technology. For example, we've all heard about digital transformation, but I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more about digital transformation strategies and how that and SaaS are actually reshaping and improving field service industries such as manufacturing, energy, healthcare, all those areas that you don't associate with technology. Is that something you can expand on?
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. It's something I think about a lot. It's interesting. Those industries you mentioned, like energy, healthcare, oil and gas, industrial manufacturing. There's this association we all have with those are not fast-moving industries, right? You don't think of them as kind of the Elon Musk, transforming industrial manufacturing across the board. And to some degree, it's true. These industries are slow-moving, but the interesting part about it is that they're critical and they never stop. And so when it comes to digital transformation, it's actually interesting to think about how these industries have been transforming from a phase perspective. So if you think back from 15 years ago, there was the ubiquity of cloud. So now we're going to have folks move from on-prem or pen and paper solutions to SaaS solutions. That's fine. It's happened across the board. What was interesting about field service, Neil, was that inherently, because of the word field and technicians are going out and about, there was another compelling event, which was around mobile technologies, right? So when iPad, iPhones were becoming more ubiquitous, let's say around the 2008 to 2010 timeframe, that also catapulted these industries to say, we need to adopt these technologies because there are significant gains we can have. And so I think that's why you saw these industries actually take a step function in terms of adopting or investing in field service technologies and embarking on transformation in, let's say, the 2012 timeframe, and about 10 years ago. And what's really interesting, coming back to, if I had to give you a report card of how everyone's been doing, it's actually still quite incomplete, Neil, because what ends up happening was that, as you're probably familiar with enterprise software, the first wave of transformation was, okay, let's get everything into the cloud, right? Which was the translation for that is, let's rewrite even the processes that we have that are broken, but let's at least get it digital, let's get it on mobile. And what ended up happening, after you do that phase is, hey, great, we're on the cloud, but then the problem is the users aren't adopting the technology because you still have these broken processes. Sometimes you even made it worse because you added more processes during this first wave of transformation. And so what was really interesting in these industries was after a couple of years of that mistake, or I should say scar tissue, there was a big focus on user experience across the board, Neil. I think I'd say around this 2014 to now, let's put it that way, where I think a lot of these industries have caught on where, look, if we're going to take advantage of all this amazing technology, not just cloud, not just the latest mobile, but even the benefits of AI and machine learning, it's only going to work if our users actually use the product, right? So you see this, I think the last 5 or 6 years, transformation really meant, getting users to accept the type of experience that they're going to be adopting, even at the trade-off of doing maybe different processes that they were doing, historically, right? And now I think we're embarking, with the I would say the top, let's call it, quarter of companies that have been on this digital transformation path, who are now benefiting from, hey, our users are adopting the solutions, we're generating this data, the service history, this asset data. Now we can make the data work for us, right? Now we can get some interesting insights on, how to really improve, the profitability of our service business, how to reduce the downtime of our asset data. But it took that scar tissue, Neil. It didn't happen, right out the gate, just because you kind of have to fall a little bit, learn and iterate for these industries. Excuse me, it does take a while to do it, but the good news is it is happening fast now.
And we've mentioned one buzzword, digital transformation, and another one, of course, is artificial intelligence. But can you tell me more about its influence on field service or even product design? Because it's having a huge impact there too, right?
Absolutely. And so if you think about the nature of our users who use ServiceMax, a lot of them are technicians. And what do technicians do when they're servicing assets? They're often doing repetitive tasks, Neil. So you go in, I may have a couple of work orders I need to do today. I'm going to go into a hospital and maybe do some preventive maintenance, maybe do some, maybe there was a failure code, I'm going to do some reactive maintenance, but there's usually some prescribed steps that I need to follow. And they fall into two buckets, right? One would be the actual diagnostic work. So in other words, I'm trying to solve a problem. This is the items that I was trained to do from a skills perspective. And then the second bucket is more back office, type steps or activities I'm doing. So now I've got to, fill in my timesheet so that I know how long I spent, bill time and materials and all that jazz. And where that really comes in to play on the question you asked is that part of our charter is coming back to helping our manufacturers get their technicians or contractors to adopt the software, is making the product even easier to use. And a lot of the problem statement is, how can we do the same amount of work with fewer steps, with fewer taps on the iPhone or on the iPad or the tablet or phone, right? Because the hardest part about this is getting people to actually follow all these steps. So an opportunity we have when we think about artificial intelligence is actually recognizing repetitive processes or work, and can we automate that for the individual so that when they drive into their location, they don't need to hit 4 taps in order to clock in, that we can surface up the, hey, it looks like you arrived at your location. Do you want to start your time now for the work order, right? Respond, verbally or, through a single tap. And it sounds, trivial, but then when we do the math with our customers, they're like, well, look, if you can save, 10 taps a day for, 1,000 technicians over a year, you get into the millions of taps. And it's not just a cost saving from a time perspective, Neil, but it's actually a satisfaction metric, because they're trying to retain their employees to not hate work, right? So that's maybe one way where we think about artificial intelligence. Yeah, there's obviously a crunching of large data that we need to do for asset uptime, but a lot of it comes to simply, can we just identify repetitive tasks and use AI to automate it?
And outside of those big buzzwords, I always like to try and delve a little bit deeper into topics people won't be too familiar with. So can I ask you that you introduce the listeners to asset data gravity?
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds very spatial, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I almost want to say great Scots, like Doc Brown in Back to the Future, having said that.
Well, it's actually fascinating. It goes back a little bit to our point of view on field service and how we're really expanding the ServiceMax solutions to help manufacturers beyond just technicians and dispatchers. And let me explain. When we think about asset data. So if you think about the actual life cycle of an asset, like I mentioned before, if there's all this information around when an asset was manufactured, they say what parts went into said asset, it gets installed onto a site. Once the asset's installed, like parts get removed, the asset sometimes moves to different rooms. There's a lot of tracking information around said asset. So when we think about the asset data gravity, you can visualize the asset in the middle, kind of like the sun, if you will, in the middle of this orbit. And around it, you can think about personas who leverage this information. And so for us, historically, it's been technicians who have said, like, well, before I go on site, I want to know the condition of the asset. Who touched it last? How old is it? When was it installed? How often did it break down? Because if I have that context before I go on site, I can handle the work much faster than if I'm surprised when I come on site. What we've found, Neil, is that beyond the technicians benefiting from information, as we've worked with our customers over the years, actually salespeople want to know, hey, before I go sell the next version of equipment or assets to, let's say, this hospital, I want to know what's installed on site, how often we're servicing those machines. Are they on the older side? Are they on the newer side? Are they breaking down? Did the customer have a good experience? Usually that information is all in the field service side of the house. But if we expose that to the sales folks, then now the sales individuals have, they feel they can do a better job in their goals and maybe upselling or not upselling, products. Likewise, if we open up that information to another persona around this orbit, around like the engineers and in R&D who are building and manufacturing the next generation of assets, they would like to know how have the assets been, how are they being used in the field, and what if we need to we find out there's an issue where we need to do a product recall. How will we know to issue an accurate recall to all the people who actually have the machines installed? Again, that information is typically housed in the field service side of the house. So when we talk about asset data gravity, we talk about this asset data that in our world originates in the field service side of the house, but really it's really at the center, and it's bringing all these other personas who are involved in the life cycle of the asset, Neil, to want to access and share information, in a common way. So that's really what we're talking about.
Fantastic. And I'm conscious we've talked a lot about various technologies and strategies, and just to bring all that to life, are there any use cases or possibly success stories that you're able to share just to bring all that to life?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple come to mind. I think one is one of our customers, Schneider Electric, very recognizable industrial manufacturing company. They've been a partner with ServiceMax for several years, and I think Schneider is a great example of a type of company who had traditional field service goals. Like, look, we want to have software in place to standardize processes so our technicians improve first-time fix rates, meaning when they show up to the site, they'll fix it the first time versus having to come back. It's a big metric in field service. But what they were one of the pioneers in the industry with, in partnership with ServiceMax, was, when our technicians go on site and let's say they're servicing a circuit breaker that's manufactured by Schneider Electric, when the technicians are in a facility, they also see other pieces of equipment that maybe are Schneider equipment that they didn't know that customer had, or even other pieces of equipment not manufactured by Schneider that Schneider can provide services for. And what's really interesting about that is, as Schneider gets more visibility over what the customer really has available on site that's potentially serviceable, it unlocks a lot of service revenue opportunities, right? And it's really interesting, because I think the first question you would ask is, how would a company like Schneider not know, like, if the customer has like one of their products or not? Yeah. And the answer is, a lot of our or not our, but just manufacturers and OEMs in general, they work with distributors who actually distribute their products. So wherever that product really ends up in the end state, the original manufacturer actually does not have great visibility. It's the same reason why when you and I buy any sort of, let's say, a washing machine or a dishwasher, and there's always that card that comes in, Neil, that says, hey, to activate your warranty, like, send your information, otherwise your warranty is void. realistically, your warranty will not be void, but it's the manufacturer trying to give you a carrot to say, hey, can you tell me where this product ended up? so they could actually have you in the database so that one, they know, okay, now Neil has this piece of equipment, the life of the equipment starts now, and they can be more proactive about around offering you services, right? And it's one of the reasons why Schneider, uses ServiceMax in that way. It's more of a repository around visibility over the life cycle of the assets beyond just using it for first-time fix rates. And then just very quickly, the second one that comes to mind, it's actually kind of interesting, was one of our medical device customers, a customer named Elekta over in it's a Swedish company, and it makes fascinating equipment, treatment of cancer and brain disorders, that sort of radiation therapy equipment. And so this is an example again of really there's really a customer's life-saving need for equipment uptime here. If the equipment's down, their lives at stake. And together with ServiceMax in their IT infrastructure, we've actually deployed what we call connected field service, where I think the number is around 20% of their service issues were resolved remotely, thanks to the IoT data integrated in ServiceMax. So again, if we think about one from the Schneider Electric example of how we see use cases to help these manufacturers improve their margin, become more profitable, so they can then invest in the next generation of assets. And on the other end of the spectrum here, our customers really having these really mission critical pieces of equipment and using ServiceMax as a way to maximize uptime so that the equipment is available, right, in a very meaningful manner. So those are a couple of examples, Neil, to give you a picture of some of the use cases.
And I'm curious, as someone working right in the heart of the industries here, especially the kind of conversations that you're having with your customers, I'm curious, are there any general insights or trends around digital transformation and SaaS, et cetera, that you could share too?
Absolutely, and I think they will be the common ones that you hear, Neil. Yeah. I think around we had the IoT hype cycle, as I call it, from 8 years ago, where everyone thought everything would be connected right now. The good news is our customers are still bullish on IoT. It's just I think it's going to be more of a linear adoption, just because hardware, it's hard to do a blanket sort of retrofit of all existing assets. I think AI obviously is top of mind, but I think a lot of customers have, quite frankly, data quality problems that they're trying to get through, that so they can truly benefit from AI. And even on the augmented reality piece, what's interesting about it, I think we're seeing more customers interested in the idea of introducing augmented reality to help with work instructions and help lesser experienced technicians get up to speed better with better training. But I would say right now the solutions are still still fragmented. A lot of use of open source technologies. But I think overall what you can take away is that all trends matter, and I think the good news about it from my lens is that our customers are no longer talking about just digitization of adopting the cloud. They're not just talking about cost savings, Neil. They're really focused at this point of saying, okay, great, I finally got over the hump of what we consider digital transformation 10 years ago. Now, what can I do with this data? And I think it's a really exciting time because of that.
And what about yourself? Are there any tech trends that particularly excite you, or trends that you're monitoring closely? Is anything out there?
Well, I think it sounds maybe poor timing on this front due to what's happening in the crypto market, but I actually do believe that blockchain technology is really fascinating, and I think it has to do with with my focus of trying to understand that. How do we create this, this vault of asset data, across our, for our customers? That's really this irrefutable, immutable source of truth for what happened to an asset. And I think the blockchain technology is really interesting, Neil, to kind of help say, well, if you imagine a world where assets switch hands, and maybe one day, and especially in this world where we're talking about refurbishing assets and not necessarily scrapping them. in theory, they could change owners more so than they have in the past. How do we keep this, irrefutable ledger of what happened to the asset, who touched it last, and all that? I think blockchain, there's some really fascinating use cases to explore with that technology.
Yeah, 100% with you. And what about ServiceMax? What's next for ServiceMax? And is there anything you can share around what you're focusing on right now?
I think it's actually somewhat related to the asset gravity concepts, Neil. And what I say about that is we're really pioneering, I think, with our customers and on the, we're fortunate that we partner with such strong types of customers, these OEMs and manufacturers, that we want to really help usher this movement of having the asset data go beyond just field service personas and bridge it not just with the sales personas. I think we've actually done a good job about that, Neil, with having the asset data work with commercial personas. I think we really see this point of now, what about the product lifecycle management, the folks who are actually designing the next generation of assets? How do we connect our information from a field service perspective to the folks designing the next generation of products? I think it's a huge opportunity for us. It's something that hasn't really been done previously, and just we're going to continue to march that direction.
Fantastic. Well, we started the podcast talking about your origin story, what took you here. I'm now going to finish by asking you to share something that has inspired you and share that with everyone listening. So if I was to ask you a book that has inspired you on your journey that we can add to our Amazon wish list, is there anything that you would leave us with, and maybe a story behind that choice too?
Lot to choose from. Maybe the one that pops to mind, Neil, is really, you might get a chuckle on this one, is The Little Prince. And it's it's not like a new book by any means. It's one of the classic ones. But the reason why I bring it up is a couple of reasons. I think one is it's a book that inspires me because whenever I read it at different stages of my life, it gives me different meaning. It's a book I read when I was in my teenage years, and then we were in my 20s and 30s, and I think the reason why I've always been fascinated with it is that there's this concept in The Little Prince that all grown-ups were children first, but few of them remember it. And it's the idea that grown-ups are narrow-minded, and it's about really the innocence of the child asking questions, and that's really about how you get to happiness. And so I bring it up because it's a book that I always, it's not a long book. I always keep it in my bag when I'm traveling in the airport, and when I'm on a flight, I can just reread a few chapters, and actually is always learn something new or relate to it on something new. But it also inspires me from on a work basis, because when you look at you're working with in field service with, as I mentioned at the beginning of the pod here, historically slow to adopt technology type industries. You always have to remind yourself that you want to have that optimism of the child, and not fall into, well, this is the way things are done, right? And I think that's where you can really be creative in pushing the boundaries, with these with the right partners, and really drive change, not just when we're building solutions, but when we're deploying them, and when we're asking our customers and their users to be like, hey, take a leap with us, right? On trying something new. The Little Prince always just kind of reminds me that, hey, don't get stuck in the grown-up thought. So, sometimes step back and think like a kid, and it'll work out.
Love that. What a fantastic answer. And I completely agree with you as well, the message behind that. And I think having a curious mind and being an optimist and positive, it's so important. And so many people lose that as they grow older. So I will be adding that to our Amazon wish list. And before I let you go, though, for anyone just wanting to find you online, contact your team, etc., what's the best starting point?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you can find all of our contacts on our website at servicemax.com. And then, and we're also very active on Twitter at ServiceMax. And then if you ever want to get a hold of me, I'm always around those handles, and active on Twitter as well. So happy to engage anytime.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for coming on here, sharing how AI and its influence on field service and product design, and also enlightening me for sure, and I'm sure a lot of people listening around the concept of asset data gravity, and also sharing your insights on digital transformation, SaaS and field service industries, but more than anything for sharing your personal story with everyone listening today. So I wish you the best of luck on ServiceMax's mission to help customers keep the world running with asset-centric field service management software. But just thank you for joining me.
No, thanks, Neil. I appreciate it. You have a good afternoon.
One of the reasons I record this podcast every day is for stories like we've just heard. I mean, exploring the world of field service industries, how technology is transforming it. That is pure gold for me. I came into this world with a curious mind, and I'm just curious how everything works, and especially around areas that I'm not too familiar with. So a big thank you to today's guest. Over to you, though. Let me know your stories, your thoughts, your questions, whatever they may be. techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes. And we'll explore a different topic tomorrow. Speaking of which, today was about those field service industries. Tomorrow, well, we're spinning the wheel of fortune to determine what topic will be discussed tomorrow, but to find out where it stops, you're going to have to join me again, I'm afraid. So I'll be waiting here, same time, same place, lurking in your podcast feeds. But a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.